The Color of Sunrise. Written by Chorbits. Read to you by Arashi. The soft murmur of voices awoke Edelgard, and she stirred, instinctively reaching under her pillow for her dagger. Her hand had closed around the worn leather of the handle, and she startled at the sound of a knock. "Good morning, Adie!" Dorothea's clear, silvery voice rang out from behind the door, and Edelgard sighed in relief, scrambling to get up. Even years after the war ended, Edelgard had come to expect threats on her life at any given moment. "You didn't forget about today's big important meeting, did you?" "Just a second, Dorothea." Edelgard recognized a second voice next to Dorothea's. Lysithea was chatting away about a new pastry recipe she wanted to try, Dorothea humming in assent with her. Edelgard furiously rubbed the sleep from her eyes, pushing aside her blankets and changing into something more presentable. After taking one last look in the mirror, she opened the door. Dorothea beamed at her, and Lysithea took her leave, waving goodbye. Edelgard stepped back, letting Dorothea in and closing the door behind them. Edelgard let herself relax, her face easing into a smile. Dorothea's presence had long been a source of comfort for her, and it was hard to worry about little things around her. Stifling a yawn, she sat down at her dresser and let Dorothea fuss over her. "How did you sleep?" Edelgard gave a half-hearted shrug, leaning instinctively into Dorothea's hands as she brushed her hair away. "Same as usual, I suppose. Better than before, at least. I'm glad I've been able to help with your nightmares. I'm here for whatever you need." It had been months ago that Dorothea had confessed her feelings, Edelgard reciprocating in turn. Yet Edelgard was still surprised by every small piece of affection she handed to her. Every time it happened, she had to fight the oncoming wave of heat that washed over her. She opened the box of jewelry Dorothea had brought over, absent-mindedly sifting through the pieces and listening to Dorothea lay out the schedule for today. Dorothea's hands were gentle, brushing Edelgard's hair away from her face and carefully sectioning it into a plait. The first time Edelgard had met Dorothea, her first impression was that they were remarkably different from each other. In the weight and color of their hair, in the environment they were raised in the way Dorothea readily gave out pieces of flattery, while Edelgard never bothered with it. Over the years, she had learned that it was in fact the opposite, that Dorothea also kept her cards close to her chest, that they both had goals they were desperate to achieve. Before Edelgard had declared war, she had been afraid. She'd seen the horror in Dorothea's eyes whenever their class was on the field and they were forced to take lives. An entire war would surely convince Dorothea to leave Edelgard's side. But Dorothea had chosen to stay with Edelgard, and for that, she would be forever grateful to have her support and company. Dorothea finished, settling her hands on Edelgard's shoulders. Their eyes met in the mirror in front of them, both of them breaking into affectionate smiles. Edelgard studied herself for just a moment longer in the mirror, thoughtful. She never cared much for jewelry, still didn't. More often than not, it got in the way of combat and was unnecessarily heavy, and unless it served a purpose, like the Imperial headpiece she wore during the war, she didn't see the point of it. Dorothea had changed her opinion a little over the years, with little gifts of ribbons and pins, and with her stories of when she lived in Enbar, and how she had turned pieces of jewelry into weapons. Edelgard appreciated every gift she received, and had treasured everything Dorothea had given her. Dorothea reached for Edelgard's gloves, but Edelgard stopped her, gently placing her hand over Dorothea's. Edelgard had worn gloves for as long as she could remember. Her childhood had been a blur of white, searing white-hot pain, the methodical scars left all over her body, her hair slowly losing its color, and her pristine, white silk gloves to hide it all. "I'll be all right for today. Thank you, Dorothea." Dorothea took Edelgard's hand, helping her up, pride shining in her eyes. "Of course, my dear. We still have some time before you need to go to the meeting. Should we take a walk? I have some place I want to show you." Edelgard furrowed her brow at her, her eyes scolding. "Please. It'll be really quick, I promise." Edelgard was loath to deny Dorothea of the things she asked for, so she agreed. After the war, Edelgard started to rebuild the monastery, turning it from a military school to a regular one, a school where instead of learning the fastest way to disarm someone, how to read and write the alphabet. She had returned to Enbar for a little while for a much-needed vacation, but came back to the monastery for her duties. "There's this hill Byrne was telling me about the other day. Oh, you should have seen her drawing. It was beautiful." Edelgard chuckled, gripping Dorothea's hand a little tighter as a gust of wind blew through her hair. It was still dark out. Edelgard wasn't sure whose idea it was to schedule the meeting at the crack of dawn. "I'm sure it was. I've read her writing too, and it's gorgeous. I've been trying to keep her occupied with her new work so she doesn't withdraw into herself again." Dorothea sighed. "Forget about all that stuff for now. We're almost there." "Do you trust me?" "You know the answer to that." You are my partner in everything I say and do. The short time where I doubted your affections is long in the past." With a chuckle, Dorothea took both of Edelgard's hands into her own. "Could you close your eyes? It'll be worth it." Edelgard nodded, amused, and shut her eyes. Dorothea led her by hand, and, not for the first time, Edelgard was reminded how rough Dorothea's hands were. Edelgard could feel the ground beneath her grow softer and the air around her grow clearer. "Any moment now. Okay, you can look." Edelgard opened her eyes, blinking for a second to adjust to the bright light. After a second of processing what was in front of her, Edelgard gasped. The sun was rising. Light crested over the hill, streaking across the sky in shades of red and purple. The glow of the sun shone the clearest gold Edelgard had seen. The warmth of the scene stunned Edelgard speechless. Dorothea turned to her, beaming. "It's perfect, right?" Edelgard could only nod in response. They both looked out over the horizon again, watching the light fill the sky. "It's strange." Edelgard cleared her throat, nervous for a split second. "I never thought that love was very important, especially after I won the war. There was never enough time for it." She looked into Dorothea's eyes, beseeching. "But you showed me how. A new beginning. How to make time for it. How beautiful it could truly be. How easy it is to need someone. To need you. You chose me, time and time again, and I still don't know why." Dorothea laughed, taking Edelgard's face into her hands. "Even after all these years, you still manage to surprise me with the silly things you say. It's not a one-way situation where I chose you. We chose each other, to be with each other no matter what. I love you, Elle. You don't know how easy it is to love you." As the sun continued its ascent, the two of them shared a sweet kiss under the clear sky.